Week 15 is upon us in the NFL. We're talking DFS. We got another huge 1 o'clock game on the Sunday slate this week. Looking forward to it. All coming up next in the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday morning DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. If you could please rate and review the podcast, we do appreciate that. If you enjoyed listening to us almost all this year, we're getting there. We really appreciate you leaving a bunch of stars for us there. Helps the podcast out a lot. Ryan, we're in week 15. We're in the nitty-gritty here. 4 weeks left of the NFL regular season. Got a lot of playoff races, got a lot of fun games going on. How are you? Hopefully doing better than Brandon Staley this morning.
Yeah, I'm doing better than Brandon Staley. I'm doing okay. Another tough week for me last week on DraftKings. It was kind of the same story where I didn't have the two guys you needed. Deebo Samuel, the same as the week before, drops another monster 37 or 38 point game. And then unfortunately, I decided to fade the Drake London chalk, right? Sort of a last minute decision, and he ended up having a career day as well. So didn't go too well for me gambling wise, but ready to get it back this week. I don't know how'd it go for you?
It was weird. I had the same kind of week. I had one team that was bad and one team that was really good. I had Josh Fields, DJ Moore, and I think it was Drake London team. So that team worked out well, but like I usually play a couple of lineups, and then I have one that is in the bigger contest. One of the bigger contests, I had Mahomes and Diggs, so it was pretty much dead like in the first quarter of that game. It's funny because I was excited to watch that game, and you could tell early. The Bills looked pretty good early, but the Chiefs still did not. And then by the middle of the second quarter, I was like, yeah, that stack is just not going to work. Rashee Rice did score, had a pretty good game, so that worked out well. We really liked him. But yeah, we had a lot of guys we liked last week. We liked Drake London a lot. There were a couple other guys that we had. Isaiah Likely was like our slam dunk tight end. That worked out well. I had the Minnesota defense, which worked out really well. I think they were 3,100. So yeah, there was a lot of good in there. But yeah, the Mahomes Diggs combo just really let me down. It's weird. Mahomes keeps getting priced the same way. We'll talk about Mahomes again this week, but just kind of not there for fantasy very often this year. In fact, pretty rarely. He's had like 2 really good weeks all year.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk that game. I think that game will be completely forgotten about again. So I don't know if you can take another chance on Mahomes. It seems kind of tough at this point.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah. Tough to. That's Chiefs Patriots. The over-runner's 37.5. Tough to get to that game.
It is, although there might be a player in that game that's super chalky, and it's a player that I Ezekiel Elliott
that we thought retired 2 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much. So we'll get into that.
Let's talk about the slate. Week 15. We got 10 games on the main slate. We have a lot of games that are off slate because we have a triple header on Saturday. The biggest slam dunk of this weekend is that Zach Moss is going to go off the slate, right? Like, there's no doubt after being chalked 2 weeks in a row and not doing anything, including like feels like 100 touches inside the 10. Never got in the end zone, but we had the Chargers Raiders debacle last night, so that's off the slate. On Saturday we have Vikings Bengals, Steelers Colts, and Broncos Lions. I think I'm remembering that right. That's the Saturday triple header. Should be fun. Obviously, college football is over for right now until the bowl games. So that's going to be, NFL kind of takes over Saturday there too. We have Baltimore and Jacksonville on Sunday night. Kind of a fun game there. Big game there. And then Philly and Seattle Monday night. Kind of an interesting game there too. It's a pretty good night game slate this week after having a lot of night games last few weeks that have been really bad. Aside from Eagles Cowboys, which actually turned out to a bad game last week. It was not a very good game. But so those are the ones off the slate. We have an interesting slate on the Sunday setup because we've got 6 games that are under 40 on the total, but we do have 3 games that are over 47. So it's a big disparity between the top games and the bottom games. We've had a lot of weeks where there's maybe like one game that's up there. We have three high total games and then a bunch of low ones. Let's start the high ones first. Niners Cardinals is 47.5. Obviously, the Niners have been scoring a lot of points. To make up that, they're big favorites in that game, even though it's at Arizona. Cowboys Bills, probably the best game. This is really fun. I'm looking forward to that game. The Bills are off the win against the Chiefs. The Cowboys are just rolling right now. That is a 50.5 total. And then we have Commanders and Rams. Not exactly the game that like jumps out to you when you think about it, but 50.5. Commanders can score and they give up a ton of points. Rams offense is rolling. Fun 3 games there. Do you have a game of those 3 that you are is far and away your favorite of the group?
I think if I had to pick one, it'd be the Rams Commanders game. Again, I just don't know what to do with the 49ers in this spot. Massive favorites. Like
stop disrespecting Brock is what you need to do.
I mean, I'm a huge Brock fan. I have been all season.
Totally kidding. Going with the Twitter narrative there.
No, I know. It's really annoying. I keep seeing those takes, and I completely disagree with them.
It's by this point, it's absurd, right? Like, I get it. Like, Shanahan's really good. The offense is really good, but I saw a quote on, I think it was Wednesday. It's like, oh, well, Jimmy was really good in this offense too. I'm like, Jimmy had his moments. This offense looks nothing like it did when Garoppolo was there. It's not even comparable. So I'm tired of hearing that one because they hit nothing deep outside the numbers ever with Garoppolo, and they do regularly now. So like, I'm tired of this looks the same as Jimmy takes.
It's such a bad take. I saw it again this week from a couple people, even after another great performance from a couple like people that I at least used to respect their takes and respect their opinions. But I mean, just really bad at this point. Purdy, it's easy to see that he's a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know what to do with the Niners in this spot. They could go off again here. They have the highest total on the slate, but I don't know.
I mean,
get enough pushback from Arizona?
It's funny because it's kind of similar to last week where they were big favorites and we're like, you know what, it's just going to all be McCaffrey. Instead, we get 370 yards from Brock. It's just, Seattle kind of hung in there enough for a little bit. The Niners started a little bit slow and just you just kind of got going. And it wasn't that like 21-3 early where you're like, all right, now we're going to see McCaffrey and Mason and whoever it may be. But it's interesting. This Cowboys Bills game is fascinating to me because we've got all these big names, but they're really expensive. Like as I was working through lineups last night, I was like, can I do this and this? And it's really hard to stack that game. Dak's expensive. CD is 9,200. Diggs is still expensive. Allen's right above Dak, the 2 most expensive quarterbacks. You can't play 2 of those and then a run back with the other one. Like they're just too expensive. And if you want to play McCaffrey, who is in a really, really nice spot as a big favorite, it's hard to get the names in this week. It's hard to stack Cowboys Bills. You can play some of the lower guys, but you're really not getting the bulk of the points then. So you can gamble on those. But then you got the weather too. It's an 80% chance of rain. It's supposed to be 50 degrees in Buffalo. So like, last week we talked about that in a couple games and it kind of held off. We talked about Niners Eagles a couple weeks ago. We're like, can you play Brock in the rain? And then it stopped raining like 10 minutes before game time. So you just never know, especially on the late afternoon games. But that is supposed to be 80% chance of rain and about 50 degrees. So it has to factor in your head a little bit when you're building lineups.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And then remembered back to last week when people were concerned about the Ravens-Rams game.
Yeah.
And the weather wasn't great, but it absolutely went off. People were concerned about the Jets game. And Zach Wilson came out and balled, threw for 300 some yards. Kind of called that on the podcast last week.
You did. I'm giving you props. And on my team that did well, I paid Garrett Wilson. So I owe you on that one. I probably would not have done it if we hadn't talked about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm with you though. I think you said it perfectly. That game's expensive and there might be some weather that slows it down. Like it just pushes me to that Rams Commanders game.
Yeah. In a nice dome stadium in LA. I think the weather will be just okay there.
Yeah, me too. And this Commanders team has been basically the best matchup in the league all season, for passing against for sure. It's a great spot for Kyron Williams, Stafford, Kupp, Puka, and then on the Washington side, they're coming off a bye, which you'd think helps their chances to stay competitive in this spot. I think so. We'll have to wait on the Brian Robinson news because if he's out, it's going to make Gibson look like a really good value at 5,200. You can even give a bump to their receivers if Brian Robinson's out. So, I think that game could be pretty interesting. Yeah, it's a weird slate where over half the games have a total under 40. So, it's real. People are really going to funnel to these other games. The one that's above 40 kind of do have some interest in. That's the Packers game.
I do too. That's among the lesser popular quarterbacks. Jordan Love's my favorite.
Me too. I have a lot of interest in Jordan Love this week. Looks like Christian Watson will be out again, which makes Dobbs and Reed really good options. Kraft is 3K. That's just a nice, easy stack right there. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, as I went through this, and we'll get to players and all that in a second. We're just kind of talking overall thoughts here. There were only like 4 quarterbacks that I was like even remotely interested in, but I liked all of them. I was like, oh, I think it was 5. But like that was the list. Like I kept going. I'm like, nope. And I think there's gonna be a couple I have to slide through. I think Jordan Love, I'm hoping, is the one that slides through, not in the most popular game. I think that this being the same price as Stafford, $200 apart, but essentially I say essentially the same price. I think that helps Love a lot. I think a lot of people will just go to Stafford at 6,000. I think he'll be the most popular quarterback. Maybe Dak or Allen, but I think Stafford will be the most popular. I think a lot of people are going to stack that game, and then I think that Love slides through. Just everybody be like, I just play Stafford instead. So I'm hoping Love slides through at a pretty low percentage.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think Stafford will be the most popular quarterback, probably by quite a bit. I think you should play him in cash games. I'm going to play him in cash games, but yeah, Jordan Love, I think he's a great tournament play.
Yeah, and I like that he was kind of off of his first kind of down fantasy game in a while too. I like that maybe that gets him off, people off him a little bit. But we'll talk about quarterbacks in a second here. You mentioned before, over half the games are under a 40 total. We've got Giant Saints at 39.5. Tommy Cutlett off NFC Player of the Week. I don't know how he got Player of the Week. By the way, his stats weren't that good, but I think everybody just likes him. But him and Zach Wilson being Players of the Week is maybe the most impossible thing of the entire NFL season so far.
Unreal.
On the same week, like impossible. We have Bears Browns at 38.5. Joe Flacco in the house there. Texans Titans 37.5. Starting to feel bad for CJ Stroud. It seems like he's losing a receiver every week. We don't know if Nico Collins is going to play. Tank Dell's obviously out. It's kind of muting the Texans lineup. Although December Derrick Henry is back, 2 touchdowns in 3 straight games. Jets Dolphins. Your friend Zach Wilson back in action. 37.5 there. Weird to see a Dolphins game with 37.5. It just says a lot about the Jets offense right there. Chiefs Patriots, also weird to see a Chiefs game this low, but the Patriots offense is obviously brutal, 37.5. And then we got Falcons Panthers, which 34.5, which would have been low anyway. Predicted to be almost monsoon-like conditions in Carolina. So it's like 94% chance of rain, a little bit of wind. Yeah, that feels like maybe some Bijan Robinson. But as I was flipping through there, I was like, yeah, I just may pump this game fully.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe you could take a chance on the running backs. Some of these spots are kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You're going to have to see what happens with Stroud. Is Stroud going to play? If not, it could be a pretty good spot for the Titans. I mean, you mentioned Derrick Henry, but Hopkins is coming off another big game. Chigokongwo had another good game, so I think it'd be good spots for them. Cleveland, how about Flacco? I mean, Flacco's looked good.
He's chucking it around the yard too. He's got no problem just throwing it around.
Yeah, that's awesome to see. Yeah, I don't know about that game though.
If CJ Stroud doesn't play, is Case Keenum the backup in Houston? Is that right?
I think it's Davis Mills.
Oh, it's Davis Mills. I should know that. He's a Stanford dude.
I think it's Davis Mills. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't have interest in any Texans.
No, I was actually just curious who it was.
Right.
I was thinking about I was actually thinking Titans defense is what I was thinking, but yeah, I think you're probably right. It has to be Davis Mills, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's weird to have a Dolphins game on this slate and it's just like an afterthought. Especially Tyreek Hill. I guess we'll have to wait on news for him too, but it seems like he's going to play. I don't know. He came back into the game on Monday night, but they were pretty disappointing against Tennessee, and it's a tough matchup against the Jets, but some leverage there. If somebody wanted to take a chance, I don't know. It seems like a tough game. I kind of don't want any part of that game.
Yeah, it's a weird setup too, because we got Tyreek is questionable and Devin Achane is questionable. So it's just It's so much of that factor. Like if Achane doesn't play, I think Mostert becomes pretty interesting. The Jets pass he's really good, but I think you can run a little bit there. And Mostert, when they get in the red zone, they hand it off to him. They feed him. He passed to McCaffrey. He has 18 touchdowns this season, which is just wild. And if Tyreek doesn't play, do you play Waddle then? What do you do? I mean, it's just the Jets are so good against outside receivers. You think they'd probably move Waddle around. Waddle and Tyreek had over 100 yards. They played the Jets the first time, which is a crazy stat because they're how good the Jets' pass defense has been. If Tyreek is out, how strongly do you consider Waddle at that point?
Yeah, I have to consider him. That's a good point about the running backs too. If Achane's out, be a good spot for Mostert. And
it's hard to pick between the two if he plays, but if he doesn't play, Mostert seems pretty easy. Also, just to my credit, Case Keenum is on the Texans, so at least I had that part right. But you're right; it would be Davis Mills, but Case Keenum would be the backup at least. So I wasn't fully crazy with my guess, but yeah, it's so that's ugly there. I think we've seen enough Davis Mills to know that that's not something we're fired up about.
Right. And back to Waddle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could play Waddle if Tyreek was out. I think he doesn't always line up on the outside, right? I don't know. I'd have to look, but I don't think. I
think they'd move him around. McDaniel's McDaniel's smart enough that I think he'll move him around pretty well.
Yeah. And you could have a big game in that spot. Just 9,900 for Tyreek Hill.
Crazy,
even if
right?
he's healthy, takes a lot to pay that off.
I can't remotely get there, especially with I just see him, play 3. He could tweak that angle. I can't get there 9,900. I probably couldn't do it if he was healthy. On this slate with some of the big name expensive guys we have, there's no way I'm playing him at 9,900. As much Tyreek's freaking awesome. Don't get me wrong, but
no, he's injured and it's a tough matchup. I don't know how you can do it.
I mean, maybe that's why you do it because nobody will have him. But he's not in play for me this week.
No, me either. And then we have that Patriots Chiefs game. I don't think anybody's going to click Mahomes and Kelsey. I don't see myself doing it. Rashee Rice probably gets decent ownership again. And then Ezekiel Elliott, if Ramondre is out. That Ramondre news is some of the most important on the slate. I was seeing Ezekiel Elliott at 50% ownership or even more projected already, which is crazy to think with a guy like Zeke.
He was RB1 last week, right?
RB1. I mean, you see he had 29 touches. So that included 7 catches for 72 yards. And the home matchup with the Chiefs actually isn't that bad. The Chiefs have kind of got crushed by opposing running backs over the last month or more.
Yeah, James Cook just did it last week, who we liked last week, and he had 140 yards and a touchdown last week.
Yes. Josh Jacobs did it before that.
Yep,
somebody else before that. So it's actually not a bad spot for Elliott. You probably just play him in cash games. Seems like pretty good value. Probably a pretty good tournament fade, though, if he's going to be that popular. Reminds me, I fell for Zach Moss again last week. Another.
Yep.
Yeah, it just feels really bad when he's that popular and scores 6-7 points or whatever. So yeah, Ezekiel Elliott might be chalk.
So let's roll into players now. But first, note from our sponsors at Circa: get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sundays in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. So, Ryan, I think we've already talked about some players in here, but you mentioned Zeke Elliott is probably someone to be popular. Is there anybody else you see? We talked about Stafford. Aside from those two guys, is there anybody else out there that's an obvious? We've had Zach Moss last week. Any chalk boring plays? I don't think there's any free squares this week, but probably Stafford and Zeke most popular. Do you see anybody else that kind of fits in that mold? Oh, lost your volume there.
Sorry.
No worries. You're good.
Left it on mute. Yeah, I think Kyron probably gets up there too.
Yeah, he's 7,500 and looked awesome last week against a tough Ravens defense.
Looked awesome again,
Yeah.
just getting a ton of usage. The matchup is elite. So yeah, I think Byron is a pretty easy click in cash games. I think he's going to be very popular. It, we always see news always seems to change Friday night and Saturday morning.
Yep.
That ends up changing the construction for cash games. But I mean, right now, I see Kyron Williams, Ezekiel Elliott, and McCaffrey just like way ahead of everybody else. So it seems kind of easy to just click those three in cash games, put Stafford in, and you're halfway there. So yeah, other than that though, moving to receiver, I don't really see any receivers that are going to be crazy popular. I think Jaden Reed would get up there a little bit with if Christian Watson ends up being out.
Yeah.
I can see people punting like a Wan'Dale Robinson. But yeah, no crazy chalk. And then tight end, yeah, Tucker Kraft and Okonkwo, maybe Trey McBride. I don't know. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, but nobody I thought both at receiver, tight end. I agree with you. I think probably Jaden Reed. I bolded him pretty quickly. I thought as I usually do, like read about the player, and then I'm like, I guess I kind of figured in my head when it's pricing me. I thought it was gonna be like 5,500. Then I realized that his big game was Monday night, and so that went off the word. He was only 8 for 27 receiving, but had the rushing touchdown, so wouldn't have been under 5,000 if he had played on Sunday. I thought it was gonna be like 53, 5,400, 4,900. I think you're right. If Christian Watson doesn't play, that could be pretty popular too. But let's talk quarterbacks. I mentioned before, I didn't think there were a ton of quarterbacks. Let's start at the big game, the Dallas Buffalo game. Josh Allen's 8,200. Dak Prescott's 8,000. Do you have a preference? Are you planning on playing one of these two guys? How do you kind of feel about the quarterbacks in the America's game of the week kind of game we got this week?
Yeah, I wish I had a stronger take. 8K seems a lot for Dak. He's been QB1 since week 6. I mean, looked amazing. Think he's MVP frontrunner, at least as of now, after what they did to the Eagles last week. It's a tough spot, though. Maybe a letdown spot. I don't know. And also, he's just 8K and doesn't have the type of rushing upside that Josh Allen has. So I think I prefer Allen in this spot. He's basically averaging a rushing touchdown per game now, almost similar to Hurts. So gives him that floor and like just a easier path to hit 40 points in a big game. So I think it's Allen. I don't know. Do you have a preference between the two?
I actually prefer Dak a little bit, but I kind of the same way. Like, there's a little bit of weather, and they're both really expensive. I don't know if it's hard. Like I said before, it's hard to stack this game because if you play Dak, you want to play CD, and he's 9,200. If you play Allen, you probably want to play Diggs on the bounce back. Like, I get that he was horrible last week. It was 4 for 24, but still had a lot of targets. And he's still Stephon Diggs. I know it's been a rough stretch, but if you play Allen, you just kind of really want to play him. And that's 8,400. It's just hard to get to. But I think Dak, multiple touchdowns in 7 straight games. Buffalo does get pressure on the quarterback, but then, they got some injuries, linebacker and cornerback we talked about before. Dak's been really good against pressure too. Like, when he gets pressured, it actually delivers the ball, plays really well. Good game script. It's a weird one though, because there's a lot of studs on offense, but Dallas can really play defense too. Like, Dallas will get after Allen. Obviously, he's Josh Allen. He's awesome. I think he'll be fine. But you can see this game getting back and forth. But these are good defenses too. Like, it'll be interesting to see with the weather and the defense. But I think go Dak. He's a little quiet last week, but they were leading that whole game against the Eagles. Like, they got up early and just kind of cruised. It was a weird, kind of a weird game. Philly fumbled 3 times in Dallas territory, twice in the red zone. Their 3 studs, Hurts, AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith all fumbled. It was a weird setup. Just kind of killed the game. Those 3 fumbles just kind of killed that game being fun. But I'm going Dak. They're just rolling right now. I actually like pairing. If you don't play Lamb, I like pairing Dak with Ferguson. I think that Ferguson is probably my favorite tight end this week. So even if I don't play Dak, I think I'm going to play Ferguson at 4,800. So I'd probably lean Dak, but I think this might be a sit down and watch the game rather than sit down and stack the game kind of thing for me.
Yeah, that was a good sell. I think Dak's the sharper play. He's going to be way less popular than Allen. I don't really think anybody's going to play much Dak this week.
Interesting. That makes me like it more because I mean this is the game. He's expensive. You're right. It's 8,000, and it's just so easy to drop 2,000 to Stafford.
It is, and I prefer. I want to play some CeeDee Lamb, so it just makes sense. I really like Ferguson too.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at stacking the Cowboys, and this is always the case, stacking a team against the Bills, who do you run it back with?
Yeah. Because if you play Dak and CD, you're not coming back with Diggs.
No, you're not. So
I could do it, but you're just like, you better find insane value elsewhere. Like, it's just I'm probably not gonna do it if you come back with Gabe Davis, like, that a 0 is in play. Like, he might go off, but there's a 0 fully in play. You come back with James Cook, I suppose, but you're right. It's hard to figure out who to run it back with.
Oh, I tried Gabe Davis last week in the afternoon slate. Did not work out.
It is and Allen missed him in that last drive too. It should have been a touchdown.
Brutal. Yeah, he did. But yeah, 3 donuts in the last 5 games for Gabe Davis, just incredible. And then you have a 25 point game, right? I mean, he is like the definition of boom bust.
Yeah. I think we say that for probably too many guys, but like he is, it literally can be a 0 or a 20. It's amazing. It's crazy.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
I think you sold me on Dak. I think he's probably one of the best leverage options on the slate, to be honest. I don't think his ownership probably going to be around 5%, whereas Allen might get up to like 20. I don't know. Just guessing. It'd be something like that. I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
So, no, I was just going to say, could you run it back with James Cook?
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. I guess you could go, if you want to go cheap, you can run it back with Dalton Kincaid, but Dawson Knox is back, but Kincaid was still got a bunch of targets and still played the most. But you're right. It is the hard part, is kind of what to do it back with. But before
you don't need to do it back with anything either, though. Sorry.
Yeah,
you don't need to do it back with anything.
You're right. You figure maybe Josh Allen runs him in, and maybe there's anybody to run it back with. Before we get to Stafford versus Jordan Love, talk to me real quick. We talked earlier about Brock Purdy, 368, 2 touchdowns last week. They are a big favorite again. It's always hard to play a quarterback in the spot where, if they're up 28-6 in the second half, they're probably, it's with Kyle Shanahan, they will run the ball at that point. Brock was 20 of 21 against Arizona last game with 283 yards, kind of insane line, averaging 315 yards a game the last 6 weeks. Arizona's 31st in pressure rate. Brock is like 79% passing when he's not under pressure. It's pretty absurd. This offense, if you don't get pressure on it, is going to slice you up pretty good. 6,800. Do you find yourself getting to Purdy this week, or are you dropping down to Stafford and Love in most lineups?
Again, I don't find myself getting to Purdy, but yeah, I would support anyone who does. I don't think anybody's going to play him again, and it's got to be a pretty good tournament play based on what he's shown. The Niners are like the most efficient offense I can remember, and Purdy especially. He's crushed the last 2 games on 19 completions. That's pretty much what he always has, about 19 or 20 completions. His 4 skill players are all so explosive. I mean, we've seen Debo is just on another level right now. And pretty much, like, I don't see many people playing Debo again. Like, I don't know.
Finally priced him way up too, which is even harder. Yeah,
right. The Niners are always so tough to stack. Or who do you pick? We talk about it every week. So no, I probably won't get there, but I think it does make a lot of sense for tournaments. I'm kind of with you, Scott. And then when I looked at this slate, really only had interest in 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks, and I'm kind of just gonna stick there. We both talked about. I'll let you talk about Jordan Love, but he was one of my favorite tournament plays on the slate.
Yeah, me too. I think that Stafford is kind of, we talked about before, probably the most popular for sure, the chalkiest. He's 6,000 home against Washington. Like, it's a perfect setup on paper. Washington struggled against the pass all year. They do enough coming back that they're always a good team to play against. And Stafford's on fire right now. 10 touchdowns the last 3 weeks. 4, 3, and 3. Like, he's balling right now. Puka and Kupp finally looked healthy last week. That's a huge factor for Stafford. Got weapons. But yeah, Jordan Love's interesting. He'd been really good. 4 straight multiple touchdown games prior to the Giants game. I won't mention that game because I know you're a Packers fan. That was a horrible loss. 25 of 39, only 218 and 1 touchdown in that game. But it's a nice matchup. They're playing the Buccaneers. They're at home. Tampa Bay's allowed 5 top 3 quarterbacks since week 6. Not top 10, top 12, top 3 quarterbacks. Desmond Ridder had 25 points on them last week. I know he had a rushing touchdown to help him get there, but he was really good against them. I just think it's a good matchup. I think Tampa Bay can do enough against Green Bay to make this, kind of push level a little bit. I think, like you mentioned before, it's easy to stack. You play Romeo Doubs, you play Jaden Reed. You could go Tucker Kraft too at 3,000. You mentioned him too. I think it's an easy stackable game. You come back with Evans pretty easily with how cheap they are. I think maybe the most important thing about Love Reed's stack is you can play Christian McCaffrey, which is kind of the thing that really sold it to me, is that you're saving so much money on Dak and Allen. You're saving so much money from Lamb or Diggs to down to Reed. Like, you could pretty much do anything else. Like, if you play the Buffalo Dallas game, you're not playing McCaffrey. You play Love and Reed. You play McCaffrey too. Like, it can really help you build something pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think you broke it down perfectly. I like the point you made back at the start about kind of like Love here coming off that disappointment against the Giants. He had been on a nice run. Maybe he was feeling himself a little bit too much. That was a really disappointing loss, but you figure it's a bounce back spot for the Packers here against
it's a big game too. Both these teams are right there. Like, it's a huge game for these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers looked like they had a good path to the playoffs. They still can make it, but that was a tough loss last week. Tampa's defense is traditionally a pass funnel. Just everything about the matchup sets up well. You mentioned what Ridder did last week, and I've just, I was down on Love coming into the season, but I've sort of changed my mind on him. He's been pretty impressive. Last week, not so good, but the month before, pretty impressive. And yeah, that stack is just very cheap.
It's interesting in the NFC playoffs, like getting the 6 versus the 7 seed usually doesn't matter that much. It's going to be huge this year. You either go at Detroit, who's kind of leaking some oil right now, or you go at Philadelphia, Dallas, or San Francisco in the 2 seed. Like, 6 or 7 is a huge factor this year. Like, it's the team that's 6 seed is going to feel pretty good about their chances to compete with Detroit. That team in the 7 spots pretty much knowing they're going home.
Yeah, you're right. 7th seed is just dead.
You never know. You never know when NFL game, but like you're going to be a double-digit underdog against the Niners, Philly, or Dallas on the road.
Right. So yeah, getting the 6th seed is just huge right now.
Are there any other quarterbacks you're considering? I mentioned before, I don't think there are. But I mean, Justin Fields was good last week. He's 7,000, but going against Cleveland. Mahomes against New England. Nobody's going to play Mahomes Kelsey this week. If you wanted a reason to do it, Mahomes Kelsey at 3% or whatever is a reason enough right there. Kyler Murray, 6,400 in a game where they're going to have to throw the whole game, but they're going against the Niners defense. My last one for you, I want to ask you about. Can you get to Will Levis at 5,400 against Houston? He was really good against Miami last week, 327 and a touchdown. Houston's been really bad against the pass lately. They've allowed 7 quarterback 1 games in the top 12 quarterbacks. What I'm saying, in the last 9 weeks, they're allowing 8.2 yards per attempt last 9 weeks. Can you get to Will Levis at all as a I'm going to save a bunch of money here, build a really different lineup? Levins, Hopkins, McCaffrey, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, maybe actually. First of all, would you want Stroud to play or not if you were playing Levis?
I would want Stroud to play.
Yeah, me too. Or else you feel like it might be, maybe the Titans get
it might be 100 Derrick Henry carries in the second half.
Yeah. But no, otherwise, I think it makes a lot of sense just because it's another cheap stack. I mean, he's even cheaper than Love and Stafford, and I like 2 of the pass catchers, Hopkins, and I think Chig is a decent play at tight end. So yeah, that is interesting.
And if Nico doesn't play too, you can kind of just come back with Noah Brown or Robert Woods, who are really cheap, and think that it kind of works that way. You can even play. If you play Conquer, you're not going to play Brevin Jordan too. But yeah, you at least you come back. If Nico doesn't play, the stack becomes kind of easy. If he does play, then you just play Nico Collins, I guess. Although if you don't want to play him, if Stroud doesn't play, it was the one to me that I think I don't know if I'll get there, but it was the one to me that I could kind of figure out in my head that I think it might kind of work.
Yeah, I think so too. If Stroud does play, you could use Dalton Schultz. I think he's back and healthy now, practicing fully.
Yep.
And if Collins is out also, think of Collins, Dell being out. That'd be an interesting spot for like a low-owned Schultz. You could see him having a big game in this spot. The last guy I was going to mention is Sam Howell. I would maybe have some interest in Sam Howell if Brian Robinson is out. I just think it would just set up as a spot where they're going to be passing a ton, probably playing from behind. I mean, so the Commanders, they haven't scored over 20 points in like 5 games or something, real points, but
Sam Howell has weirdly been good. It's strange.
He scores over 20 points every game.
Yep.
So, I mean, imagine if they finally have, or score a little more real points. And he's been doing it with his legs recently. I know he has 4 rushing touchdowns in the last 3 games. I don't necessarily expect that to continue, but I just don't think many people will roster him. And it's kind of an interesting way.
What receiver are you playing with him?
Oh, that's the tough part, right?
I was hoping you have an easy answer for that for me, because that is the tough part. McLaurin's it's a ghost.
Yeah, I would still lean towards McLaurin, but I think he'll be the most popular, so I guess I could get behind Dotson or Samuel. That's what's always so tough about the Commanders, and everyone talks about it, but who do you pair him with? I don't mind pairing him with Gibson, but I kind of want to put a receiver in there too. I don't know, Scott. That's what usually keeps me off stacking the Commanders, but I could maybe take another shot on McLaurin.
Wow. Fantasy football legend Matt Modica in the chat. That's we're graced with presence there. That's a legend. He's a stud NFFC player. I think he 50% of his prime times made the playoff this week. So say hi to Matt for us there. So let's jump into running backs. The first note from our sponsors at Odds Are you ready to revolutionize your sports betting approach? Begin with a 2-week free trial at oddsr.com. That's ODDSR.com. Where cutting-edge AI technology sharpens your edge in the betting game. Benefit from our proven 2-year track record, boasting a 60% accuracy rate and impressive 10% ROI. The Odds Are AI meticulously sifts through extensive data to reveal high-value, green-value plays, guiding you towards smarter betting decisions. And it's not just about the numbers. The Odds Are app is exceptionally user-friendly, crafted to be your go-to betting advisor right at your fingertips. Jumpstart your journey to betting smarter and more successfully. Simply visit the iOS or Google Play Store, download the Odds Are app, and step into a world of confident betting. Your path to a more strategic betting experience starts with a 2-week free trial. Download today, where smart strategy triumphs over luck. And Odds Are is ODDSR. Go check that out. So running backs, I think you mentioned 2 guys that are expensive this week. They're going to be popular. We got like 5 or 6 guys over 7,000, but the top is Christian McCaffrey, 9,300. Huge favorite against Arizona. Had a down week for Christian last week. Only had 153 yards, but didn't score, so that's considered a down week. Only had 1 catch, so a little bit of a down week for C-Mac is still a great week for everybody else. Alvin Kamara, 8,600. Kyron Williams, 7,500. Saquon, 7,300. And then you got the Miami guys. Achane, 72. Mostert, 71. We kind of talked about this already, this range, when we talk about chalky plays, but McCaffrey and Williams, I assume, for you?
Yeah, for sure for cash games. I can't remember a week where, at least, I know it's only Friday, but yeah, I can't remember a week where the 3 running backs for cash games just sort of stuck out as much.
Right.
McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, and then Ezekiel Elliott if Ramondre's out. But after that, there's not much. So those guys would be very popular. And like I said, I think you just play them in cash games because they're good plays, but it opens up a lot of leverage for tournaments if it's going to end up like that. Like, yeah, they're all good plays, but running back and other guys have ceilings too. And, does McCaffrey have a ceiling for 9,300? Yeah, sometimes, but not all the time. We see him score just 20 points quite often. He did it last week.
Just 20 points.
Right. And I say that, but like for tournaments, CeeDee Lamb's the same price. He could easily score more than 20 points. Yeah. And then you're not going to want McCaffrey.
Do you remember how many touchdowns McCaffrey scored the first matchup against Arizona?
No, I don't.
That would be 4.
Yeah, I see that 51-point fantasy game. Yeah, so he's a great option, and I'm going to play some McCaffrey.
Fully priced for sure at 9,300. But Arizona struggles against the run. I guess the only theory would be they just have so many weapons. Like they could score via the pass in the first half, and they're up so much. Maybe he scores once, and then they go to Jordan Mason. So it's an NFL game. There's always a lot of pass, but I think that of all the weeks to pay up for McCaffrey, I think this is the one to do it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think so too. I'm definitely going to have some exposure to McCaffrey. I don't know. He started the game with what, like a 74-yard run last
and
week?
He got tackled at 2 and then came out because he was too tired. And then Mason scored the next play and then never scored after that. So it was, it was just one of those games where they just didn't need him as much as they normally do. But
you're right, though. Arizona has just been awful against opposing running backs.
Yeah, on paper, it is a full green light week for McCaffrey.
It's a great spot, yeah.
8,600 for Alvin Kamara. I assume no one's going to play that.
Yeah, I really don't want to. I was sort of upset with myself for falling into it last week. I ended up playing him last week.
He kind of saved a little by scoring, but yeah, it didn't do. I mean, 45 yards just didn't do nearly enough. The Giants are bad against the run. I think 8,600 is just too expensive this week, and Derek Carr is so painful to watch. This offense. I don't know. The weird thing with Kamara is I like him a lot more when they're losing and because he just catches passes. You look at his stats and it is a big difference. So his catching passes when they're winning or losing. And they're home favorites this week. I just kind of feel that all that kind of lines up that I'm not going to use him at 8,600.
Yeah, same with me. And the reason that I got on him last week, at least a big part of it, was Taysom being out.
Yeah, that's right.
That I thought that was huge. At least solidified the goal line carries, and you think he would get 20 touches, but that Saints offense is just so brutal. They didn't have Michael Thomas, they didn't have Shaheed. So I mean, I was just sure that
Carr was 18 of 26 for 119 yards last week.
Home against Carolina.
Yeah, and I know they've been good against quarterbacks. They play the pass well, but come on. 119 yards and 26 attempts. I know he had the 2 touchdowns, but man, it's hard to watch. Olave got there. He had the touchdown at least, which helped, but yeah, it was rough. Kyren Williams, you mentioned, is popular. I think I fully agree there. You broke that one down well, but I mean, he just gets all the touches in that backfield. He had 90% of the backfield touches again last week. 25 for 114 against Baltimore. And I watched that game. I live in LA, so that was a local game. I had the red zone on one and then that game on the other because I was, rammed. It turned out to be a really good game. He had impressive runs too, really good moves and then strong when he needed it. It's just one of those things that he just looked really good and passed the eye test fully. You always look at the stats and against Baltimore, that's great. But watching that game, he was really impressive. The Rams O-line actually played pretty well too. They're a home favorite. Washington's allowed a top 10 running back in 5 straight weeks. This is a fantastic spot for him too.
Yeah, that's a great point about passing the eye test, because I think people were sort of knocking Kyren as just a guy, at the start of the season. But I noticed those running between the tackles and sort of running over some linebackers and yards after contact, that stuck out to me as well. And it's just a great spot. So yeah, definitely Kyren in cash games, but again, you can fade that in tournaments just because he's going to be so popular. You can play him too, but again, there's going to be opportunity here if there's other running backs that you like, because those 3 guys are just going to be so popular.
Yeah. And then we talked about the Miami guys. I think that Mostert becomes really interesting if Achane doesn't play. Another 2 touchdowns last week, 21 for 96. Leading the NFL with 18 touchdowns. I think we talked about the Jets. You can run against them, but you can't pass against them. So I think it fits well. And like I said before, when they get inside the 10, it's Mostert time. They really feed him in the red zone. So I think that really works at 7,100. But dropping down a little bit, there's a lot of guys in the 6 to 7 range too. I mean, we're starting with Rachaad White. He's 7,000. Got there again last week. You guys have been really, really consistently good. 135 total yards last week and a receiving touchdown. We talked about Atlanta last week and not getting a rushing touchdown. They still have not, because Rachaad White's touchdown was receiving. That stat is still intact. They're playing Green Bay this week. Green Bay is bottom 10 in yards to running backs. It's a really good matchup. They've allowed 5.2 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns to running back in the last 5 games. It's a really good spot for White too. I think it's 7,000. He's getting up there in price a little bit. I don't know if people are going to go to that. I think it's a really good spot for him too.
Yep, I agree with everything you said. I think he makes perfect sense in our Packers stacks, in our Jordan Love stacks.
Yep.
I don't think that many get to White, and he's a good option. Pretty good matchup against Green Bay. Do you have any interest in Bijan? You mentioned that game might be played in a monsoon. I'm not really sure what to think about it.
I mean, you talk about matchups, it's great. We talked about Carolina's tough against the pass, but they are not tough against the run. They've allowed 21 rush TDs to running backs. He had 7 targets. It's the same thing with Bijan. Like he got there again last week at 88 total yards and touchdown, but he had 56% of the backfield touches. It's just so annoying and frustrating. But 6,800, the talent is huge for that number. Yeah, I think he's playable in the matchup. I think it's a really good matchup. Derrick Henry's right there, 6,900. Tony Pollard, 6,700. What do you think about those two guys kind of in the same spot? There's a lot of names in this range.
Yeah, I think I could click on Derrick Henry, especially if Stroud is out, like we kind of mentioned. You could see maybe the Titans just cruising, and then it becomes a Derrick Henry spot. 6,900. Yeah, can he give us 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for sure?
Yep.
So yeah, I don't mind Henry. Maybe James Cook. I don't know. I don't know why they didn't use Cook more last week. They
used him so much early, and then I thought he was going to have a huge game, and then they kind of went away from it. You're right, in the second half.
I actually went and checked if he was hurt because he looked so good in the first half and even so good carrying the ball. They were handing it off. They gave him a couple draws and took him for big gains. He was great in the receiving game. And then in the second half, not only do you see Latavius, but you see Ty Johnson out there. But yeah, I don't know. It didn't make sense to me. I'd like to take a chance on Cook. What do you think?
He had 6 touches for 79 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter of that game. The rest of the game, the Bills had 18 backfield touches. Only 9 of them were him. Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. He'd been so successful, and you're in like the most important game of the season. Yeah, so that worries me a little that he just is never really going to get that many touches. I don't know.
He does have 100-plus yards in 4 straight games. Tough matchup, though. Dallas, no running back has over 70 yards against Dallas since week 3. The last running back 1 week against Dallas is in week 5. They've been really good against running backs. You think I'm a little crazy. You might get a little crazy here. I really like Breece Hall this week at 6,400. I think it's a really good game script for him at Miami. Miami's going to score. I think that maybe not as much as we used to think, but I think Miami is a good chance to score some points, especially if Tyreek plays. Could be a really good game script if they get behind. Breece had 9 targets last week. He was 8 for 86, 126 total yards. I think that he is a guy at this point at 6,400 works really well if they do get behind. If they get up or if it's a close game, not as well. But I think he could be a really nice PPR guy. DraftKings full PPR points. I think he'd be a really nice guy at 6,400 if they get behind that game. So it's a little bit of game script gamble, but I think it's a pretty good gamble here at 6,400.
Couldn't agree more. It was one of the few moves that I got right last week. I actually played a decent amount of Hall at absolutely no ownership, just because I sort of bought into the weather might take the spot away from Garrett Wilson, so I kind of pivoted to Hall. They both ended up smashing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. No one's going to play him again, and in the right game script, he definitely has some ceiling potential.
Someone asked in the chat about Terry McLaurin. We talked about him a little bit earlier as a flex option, so that's not DFS. It's like a regular lineup. In this matchup with this team, with their setup, I think you got to play McLaurin this week. I don't know how deep your team is. I don't know who your backups are, but yeah, I know he's been really frustrating. He hasn't been over 50 yards in the last 3 weeks. He has 2 touchdowns all year, but in a game that has the highest total on the whole slate, tied with the Bills-Cowboys game, I think there's a spot here where McLaurin's a flex. I think you got to play that.
Yes, absolutely. I know it's tough, but I think there's got to be a little bit of narrative that he had 0 catches last week.
Yep.
And they had a bye as well. So there's like a lot of time to think about that, prepare for this week.
I love wide receiver 1 coming off 0 catch games. I think that he's in someone's ear, and when you mentioned the bye, he's in someone's ear for 2 weeks now. So,
right.
Real quick, finishing up running backs. You mentioned Zeke, really popular at 5,800, running back 1 last week. He was only 22 for 68, but they just gave him so many touches. He had 8 targets. Kansas City's bad against the run, too, 4.8 yards per carry. New England's got to keep it a little bit close for him to be probably involved, although they may dump it down to if they're not, too. So I think that a lot of people play that 5,800. Is there anybody else down here running back-wise? You mentioned Antonio Gibson before, 5,200, I think you said. Chuba Hubbard's down here at 5,600. Is there anybody else you like down kind of under 6,000? Maybe if you want to fade Zeke in a tournament.
I like Gibson if Robinson is out. I know we talked about it. But I would be playing Gibson if Robinson ended up being out. I don't know. After that, there wasn't much. I mean, thought about AJ Dillon, but he just never seems to work out, and it's not a great matchup. And I don't know. We're gonna have to see what happens with Aaron Jones. Maybe Aaron Jones ends up playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Scott. Not really, I guess, is my answer. What about you?
Yeah, I've liked Chuba a lot this year, but Atlanta's tough to running. As we mentioned, they have not given up a running touchdown to a running back all year. Still the case, allowing 3.8 yards per carry. He's been getting a lot of touches, though. He has 25 touches the last couple weeks. We mentioned that he's clearly the guy over Miles Sanders now. But yeah, I don't love anybody down here. I'd probably just kind of try and get my way to Breece Hall at 6,400 if I had to do it. I'd probably just find a way to save $600 elsewhere and move up. Yeah, last guy I want to ask you about. We kind of touched on him real quick, but Tony Pollard, 6,700 in this Dallas Buffalo game. Just kind of, he's getting a lot of touches. He's kind of getting there recently, but still not very efficient. The touches have been up the last 4 weeks. He had 8 targets last week, 23 the last 4 weeks. We're just not getting those explosive plays from Pollard. And at 6,700 in this game, like, I just think you want that. But, if he's getting a lot of touches, that works. He has not been very exciting.
No, I think you broke it down well. It's been nice to see him involved in the passing game more recently.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned 7 catches last week, 6 catches a couple games. Yeah, I mean, the usage is there, and the game environment could be favorable for him. I don't know. Like, he's been really disappointing for me this year, and I probably won't click on him, but I don't see many other people clicking on him, so maybe.
Yeah, I think that he's interesting to me. I think that him or Bijan kind of right in there, guys that were highly drafted early and have not fully given it to us, but maybe down the stretch here we get some action there. But let's talk about receivers. First note from our sponsors at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sportsbooks, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. Expensive receivers, Ryan. We've talked about a bunch of those already, but Tyreek is 9,900. He might not play. If he does, that's super risky to me. CD Lamb, 9,200. Stephon Diggs, 8,400. We have the Rams guys in here. Kupp is 7,800. Puka is 7,300. A lot of names in here. Debo's up to 7,700. They've moved him up finally. He was 6,200 2 weeks ago. Big jumps. Mike Evans in here. Jalen Waddle. Ayuk, Olave, all over 7,000. There are a ton of big name receivers this week. Tell me how to figure this group out, because there's a lot of stud names in here.
Yeah, I can't get to Hill. I think we mentioned it. Got a comment in the chat too about the Jets-Dolphins game being having some bad weather, and yeah, it looks like might.
I'm sure that'll be great for Zach Wilson. No problem.
Yeah, but I see sustained 20 miles an hour with gusts up to 35 and maybe even some rain. Again, like, that's something you should definitely check on Sunday, not on Friday. But yeah, that's just another reason can't pay 9,900 for a banged up Tyreek in this spot. Really like CeeDee Lamb, touchdown in 5 straight. I just think he has the highest ceiling at the position. I think he has 5 games already with at least 11 catches. I mean, he's one of those guys that always looks open, pretty much is always open.
They have shifted their offense towards him since whenever they're after the 49ers game. Like, they pretty much have said he's our best player, and they've just fed him. He leads the NFL in catches, targets, and yards per game since week 6. Like, that's the triple crown of receivers right there. He's been awesome.
Yes. Focusing on CD has absolutely worked. Look what it's done for Dak in that offense. Yeah. So I really like CD in this spot. Diggs is interesting. We mentioned it last week. He hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 6. It wasn't even close last week with 24 yards. But I think it's still interesting for 8,400. I'm not ready to be done with Diggs yet. If you're going to play Josh Allen, I think you probably want some Diggs with him. What do you think?
It's tough, right? Because I love Stephon Diggs, but 7 weeks in a row without 100 yards. He hasn't been in the top 50 of receivers in 3 or 4 weeks. And only 2 wide receivers have had 100 yards against Dallas all year. Like, their defense is just really good. But yeah, he's 8,400. He's Stephon Diggs. Like, it's coming at some point, right? He had 100 yards in 5 of the first 6, and then none in the last 7 is a wild little stretch here. I think that the breakout's coming, just a matter of trying to time it. Wow, we have all kinds of legends in the chat today. We've got the guilds, NFBC, one of the better NFBC players. He won the online championship a couple years ago for whatever, it was $125,000. So we got a lot of stud fantasy players watching the chat this week. We really appreciate everybody joining all the comments. Thanks to Mr. Portugal for that Jets Dolphins note that Ryan mentioned. It's wind is the one thing I worry about with passing with weather in NFL games. I usually got to be a monsoon of rain for me to worry, but wind. Tua's not the guy that's going to pierce the ball through the wind like someone like Stafford or Josh Allen would do. So that would worry me in a Dolphins passing game too. What do you do with we talked a lot about Stafford earlier. Are you playing Cup with Stafford, or are you playing Puka Nacua with Stafford? One of the bigger questions this week, honestly.
Yeah, it is. I don't really have a strong lean, but I think seeing Cup with a big game finally again last week has sort of reinstilled my confidence. I don't know. I was ready to be done, but a healthy Cup should probably be more expensive than 7,800 in a spot like this. And Cup, he's not going to be chalky this week. And neither is Puka though. Like, it's weird because Stafford's going to be very popular, and obviously that will bring the ownership of Cup and Puka up a little, but I think
it's kind of like when you get like 2 guys that split MVP votes in sports. Like, I think it's just like, I think everybody will play one or the other, not both. And I think it'll kind of be split down the middle. It just kind of kills both their ownerships.
Right. Yeah. So I have interest in both of them. I guess my lean is Cup. I still, have it stuck in me that, when Cup was 9K and putting up 30 plus points every single week. I mean, you have just a prime matchup against the Commanders team, who is a bad defense, and the secondary has been the worst part of their defense. So yeah, I like Cup and Puka, but probably a slight lean towards Cup.
It's funny, as I was looking, I was like, I wonder, and I looked and I was like, oh, the Washington's really bad against outside receivers. And I looked, I'm like, oh, they're bad against slot receivers too. So like that didn't work. Cup led them in targets the last 2 weeks, 18 targets. I think I probably lean that way too. Just under 8,000, you get Cup right there. It's really nice. He looked different last week to me. I watched a bunch of that game. But did you see that catch Nacua made late in the game on the sideline, that diving? That was an unbelievable play. Like, Stafford, it was an unreal throw. Like, he wasn't even open, and he threw it in the exact perfect spot. But that catch diving in the rain, Nacua is really good. And I know that we talked about him a lot early in the season that kind of waned off a little bit. But, man, he's just really, really good. He's killing the other rookie receivers. There's so many stud. We talked about JSN and a lot of these guys that, like, stud rookie class. But Nacua's been awesome.
Yeah, he has.
Been a great story all year.
Yeah, and you watch him out there, and he looks, like a sort of number 1-ish type receiver.
It's not just a guy that they're like dumping it down to. He's getting 10 targets. It's kind of work. Like, he's just really good.
Yeah, he's a weapon for sure.
Anybody else in this range? Jalen Waddle, suddenly we got some wins concerns there, but if Tyreek sits, he becomes interesting. Mike Evans, disaster game last week. We talked about how consistently good Evans had been. He almost had a touchdown. His hand touched the out of bounds before his second foot did, but 8 yards and 1 catch was killing people. Debo's at 7,700, 5 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. They're giving him the ball in the run game. He's scoring on runs. He had 149 yards receiving. Ayuk had 126. Like, the Niners had 200-yard receivers last week, and their tight end scored. Like, it was a bonkers week. And the guy that I really like down here, I like Olave again this week. He was quiet last week, but he did score. The Giants play a lot of man defense, which helps him. They've struggled against wide receiver ones. 7,100 for Olave this week. I don't think anybody's going to get there. I think everybody's kind of over Derek Carr. I like Chris Olave this week as kind of a lower percentage guy in this range.
Funny, right when I think I've decided to get off of him. I get it if you don't play him. Like, it's just
the offense is hard to watch, but I just think I think he's the guy in that offense. I think they're going to look to him. I think the targets will be there, and I don't think anybody's going to play him this week. And I don't think the Giants are good against receivers, so I can kind of talk myself into that one.
Yeah, I was all in on Olave the last 2 weeks, so I can get behind it. I feel like he was a little bit unlucky. Again, 2 weeks ago, he got stopped at the one twice against the Lions. In the game against the Panthers, I mean, he nearly caught a deep touchdown. It was pretty close. Stafford had him, I think. Oh, it was a good play. It was a good play by the defender to break it up. But anyways, yeah, he has a ceiling for that price. Yeah, Scott, I have some interest in Mike Evans. I think it just makes perfect sense with the Packers stacks. And I was checking on Jair Alexander. I don't know what's been going on with Jair Alexander because he's missed 5 straight games, but was never on IR, and they didn't place him on IR. And he's sort of been like questionable with his status up in the air for a lot of those games. So I guess I'm just assuming he doesn't play. But yeah, I like Mike Evans. It just makes sense in my Packers stacks.
It's so funny because you say that, and like all the stories about Alexander are like Alexander mystery. Like he didn't travel. Like there's just a lot of it seems like everybody that writes about the Packers kind of feels like you do. It's like they just don't know fully what's going on, what his status is. But Green Bay plays a lot of cover 3 defense. Evans has been good against teams that do that, so I think a lot of works there. And again, stud receiver off a bad game. I think I always like that as a spot there. There's a lot of our receivers we liked in the 6,000s that have moved up in the 7,000s. The 6,000s is a lot more bare than it was earlier in the year. And we talked about, Olave and Debo and Ayuk and Puka. Like all these guys were in the 5,000 and 6,000 that have moved up. So there's a lot of guys in this range, but it makes this mid-range a little tougher than it used to be. DJ Moore, 6,900, got there again last week. He was chalk DJ Moore last week. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. Now a top 10 receiver 5 weeks in a row when Justin Fields plays. Tougher matchup here, though. Cleveland's top 5 in the NFL to wide receiver 1s. He is better against man defense. Cleveland plays a lot of man. It's a tough matchup at Cleveland here. DeAndre Hopkins is down here too, 6,200. Rashee Rice is 6,100, and he's moved up too. He's moved from the 5s to the 6s. Hopkins is probably the most interesting. I think 6,200. He was really good last week. I think that his price would have been higher if they played on Monday Night Football, so that the big game was after the pricing came out. The crazy thing is Will Levis has thrown 8 touchdowns. 6 of them are to Hopkins. That's a pretty crazy percentage right there. Wide receiver 1s. We talked about Levis. We talked about wide receiver 1s been good against Houston. I think Hopkins is probably pretty popular at 6,200.
Yeah, I think so too. And rightfully so for all the reasons you mentioned. 12 targets in back-to-back weeks. Good matchup. Yeah, I think it'd be pretty popular and probably good enough value where you could even use him in cash games as a last receiver spot. Yeah, I'm pretty confident.
This range is tough. There's just not a lot of names in here.
Right. And Rashee Rice is the other one because there aren't a lot of names. Him and Hopkins are really going to stand out. They'll both be relatively popular. Another salary hike for Rashee Rice, but he's pretty much deserved it. 7 catches and a touchdown last week. That's at least 7 catches in 3 straight games, 10 targets last week. I guess it depends what you think about this spot for KC. Maybe it could be sort of a statement game for Mahomes and KC after what happened last week and sort of Mahomes, not looking so great.
I would say melting down is what you're looking for.
Melting down, yeah, that's the way to put it. That's what happened. So, I mean, yeah, it wouldn't shock me to see him come out and throw for 300 yards in a spot where no one's really on him. So, yeah, I think Rice is still okay. He projects well still. He'll be relatively popular.
There's not even a receiver listed between 6,300 and 6,900 this week that's active. Like I thought it was a tough spot, and I looked, and there's not even guys in the spot. It's not like they don't. I don't even like. It's not that I don't like guys. It's just there's nobody in here. It's just everybody's probably been priced up or down. So let's talk down in the 5,000s. We have Garrett Wilson at 5,800. We mentioned the weather in that possible game there, but Miami's given up a lot of touchdowns to wide receiver 1s the last couple of months. He had 14 targets last week from Zach Wilson, 108 yards. Drake London, you mentioned before, he was 4,600 last week. We talked about him a lot last week. Moves up to 5,400. He was 10 for 172 on 11 targets. But man, the thing that stuck out to me with London was how good he looked. Like those catches were awesome. He had that one ball deep where he kind of just jumped over the receivers and took it for the DBs and took it from him. He just looked awesome. I know Carolina's been good against wide receivers all year, but London's probably in a play again at 5,400.
Yeah, he probably is. And you're right. He looks really good. It's too bad he doesn't have a better quarterback.
Yeah, it really is. Because I think he's actually a stud.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, so his price went up 800. Basically his first big game of the season. I mean, it feels a little bit like you're chasing it. But again, still probably a pretty good play.
And they may run the ball 1,000 times this week too.
Yeah, especially in those conditions. My favorite guy in this range is actually Dobbs.
All right, I like that because I think that more people will play Reed than Dobbs.
Definitely, which is going into my thinking. Again, this is assuming Christian Watson's out. If Watson ends up playing,
I don't think he's playing, by the way.
Yeah, me either. But yeah, I just think Dobbs gets a little forgotten about, and I think he's got a ceiling. He's got 7 touchdowns this year. He could catch 2 touchdowns. So yeah, I do like Dobbs. Gabe Davis, if you're playing Josh Allen, I guess you can consider Gabe Davis, but it's a tough click. McLaurin, I'm
gonna let you consider Gabe Davis and just move on.
I don't think I'm gonna consider Gabe Davis. No, I'm not. But yeah, McLaurin I mentioned too. I have a little bit of interest in McLaurin.
Any thoughts on Brandon Cooks in this high total game, 5,200? I looked and he hasn't had more than 5 targets the last 4 weeks since that big game he had. I get if you want a cheaper part of this game, I think I'd play Jake Ferguson instead.
I wrote the exact same thing in my article, Scott. Basically, word for word.
I promise I read it, but I don't read it before the podcast. I don't want to.
No, it's not even.
I did not steal that from you.
No, I know you didn't. It's not even up yet, so nobody.
Oh, there you go. I can't blame myself.
I'm still working on it, so no. But I agree with you.
By the way, it is always good. So pitch to everybody that if you listen to this, definitely read Ryan's article on the site. RotoWire.com. Go check that. RotoWire.com/pod for a free trial for the site too. So if you are not a member and you want to check it out, no credit card required. But RotoWire.com/pod. I figure I get some business in there. But yeah, definitely read Ryan's DFS article. It's great stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks. I thought the same thing about Cooks, getting 4 or 5 targets a week, even if he scores, he gets you 16, 17 or something. Yeah. Do you, that's fine. Obviously you can win. It's not going to kill you, but do you necessarily want that? I don't know. I prefer just pairing Dak with Ferguson like you. Going down the list, Dotson or Samuel, do you have anything there?
It's tough. I think that I'd probably just go Samuel. I think he had the 12 target game the week prior, and then he was 4 for 65 with 5 targets last week. If they get a spot here, I think you just get a lot of dump downs to Samuel, mid-range stuff. So 4,600, I think I go Samuel. Dotson probably has the bigger 2 touchdown kind of ceiling game, but he also has a giant floor. And at 4,600, I think I'd just rather get the guy with the better floor. I think that Samuel works there. One guy I want to ask you about down here, Marquise Brown is 5,100. We talked about how the Niners are huge favorites, what you do with them. On the flip side, if the Niners are up in the second half, a lot of throwing, Niners do, they struggle anywhere, it's against outside receivers. Charvarius Ward is questionable this week. He's clearly their best cornerback. He missed a lot of the game last week. 5,100, I think, keeps people off I'll play the cheap run back in this game. So I think he's expensive enough, not expensive, but expensive enough where people if he was 3,900, I think everybody would play him. 0 last week on 3 targets after a 12 target game. Can you get there at all on Hollywood? Because I know it's tough, but the game script sure works well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really considered it, but I guess
I don't know if I can get there, but it sure lines up kind of nicely.
It does, and I think Ward being out would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you would know more than me.
He is, their secondary is playing well, but he is definitely the best cornerback they have.
And, DK did fine last week, right? I know Hollywood Brown isn't DK Metcalf, but yeah, I wouldn't. I guess I don't mind it. It makes sense, especially
if you're in a spot where they get up, 21-3 at halftime, Kyler's going to throw the ball 1,000 times in the second half.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Especially, if you're going to play McCaffrey, it'd be nice to have a Cardinal in tournaments. Yeah. My favorite guy in this 4K range is Rashid Shaheed.
I assume that's after Jaden Reed.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's after Jaden Reed.
Okay. That's pretty obvious, but I just want to make sure. But
sorry, yeah, no, I didn't bring up Reed because he's in my lineup, so I didn't see him in the pool while I'm scrolling through it because Reed is already in the lineup.
Yeah, we talked about him plenty. We talked about him plenty earlier. We talked about Love. Sell me on Shaheed.
Oh, I mentioned I jammed Olave the last 2 weeks. Shaheed was out both of those weeks. I just think he can pay off that salary pretty easy he'll be out there more with Michael Thomas being out. I think it's a pretty good matchup against the Giants. Yeah, he really only needed to catch a few passes. Scott, he was a guy I've been trying to play ever since the Michael Thomas injury. I played him. I think I jammed him actually in that game against Atlanta where he got hurt. He got hurt in the first quarter, I believe. He already had 5 targets. That was really annoying. I just think he's going to go under-owned for the type of ceiling he has. And I kind of want to get some of my money back that I lost on him in week 12.
Your day just got a lot better than Brandon Staley. She just got fired.
Oof. Yeah.
Chargers fired Staley and their GM.
Wow. I mean, can't say they don't deserve it. Staley, especially after last night. I mean, that was pretty embarrassing.
It was really, and they quit. But so I made the joke earlier about you and Brandon Staley. I feel bad now because he just lost his job. Nobody wants that, but
he'll get another one.
Brandon Staley and Tom Telesco both let go by the Chargers just 19 seconds ago, as reported by Ian Rappaport.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, I was just going to touch on Reed since I skipped him. I mean, Reed is a great play for cash games. Probably a lock if Watson is out. Season high in catches and targets last week. I know they only went for 27 yards, but he had another 4 carries. That's multiple carries in 3 out of the last 4 games. 7 touchdowns this year. He looks like a good draft pick from the Packers, and they rely on him quite a bit already. So, I think you can just plug Reed in.
A lot of people have said it, but kind of playing in that mini Deebo Samuel role, like getting some sweeps, getting some carries. I think he had 4 for 38 rushing last week. Like you had that plus 10 targets, and it's hard not to play a guy under 5,000. What about the 3,000s? You mentioned Wan'Dale Robinson earlier. He's 3,700. Really nice game on Monday Night Football. Probably would be more expensive if it hadn't been a Monday night game. 7 targets, 6 catches for 79 yards. He also had 2 carries for 36 yards there. The Saints do struggle with slot wide receivers. They're better against outside guys. So that helps Wan'Dale. So I assume you like him. Is there anybody else in the 3s you like? I found the 3s a little bit tough this week.
Yeah, I found the 3s tough as well. Not really. Demario Douglas, I guess, is worth mentioning. He's at the top of that range.
If he play, he missed 2 weeks with concussion, so he should be back. I like
Belichick said he's all good.
Okay. You look at his targets before he got hurt: 7, 7, 9, and 9. They are a 9-point dog against KC. Assuming he plays, I actually really like him at 3,900. I think that you give me that many targets at 3,900 in a game, I'm going to have to throw the ball a million times. I like Demario Douglas a lot this week.
Yeah, I do too. And probably pretty good leverage off of Ezekiel Elliott if you decided to do that.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah, because everybody's kind of the Zach Moss going to an Indy wide receiver we talked about a couple weeks ago. I think that's a really good point.
Right.
I think I like him more than Mingo this week. They're the same price. Mingo had 9 targets last week, but 2 for 22. I saw a stat that like his uncatchable ball percentage is second highest in the NFL. Doesn't say a lot about Bryce Young there. We mentioned the monsoon. I think that I'd go Douglas and Wan'Dale over Mingo this week. As much as I've liked Mingo recently, give me Douglas and Wan'Dale over them.
Yeah, me too. That's too bad. I played a bunch of Mingo last week too, and just didn't work out with Bryce Young.
We talked about a lot of players so far, but real quick, tight ends. We talked about a lot of them as we're kind of talking about stacks and quarterbacks and stuff, but Travis Kelce, easily the higher 7,600. We got some guys in the 5s in Kittle, Dalton Kincaid, and Trey McBride. We both mentioned we like Jake Ferguson a lot at 4,800 this week. 8 targets last week. He has 5 tight end 1 weeks in the last 7 games. 16 targets last 2 weeks, 8 and 8 in those games. I think it lines up really well with Ferguson. My favorite play at tight end. I loved Isaiah Likely last week. I love Jake Ferguson this week.
Oh, and you nailed Isaiah Likely. Yeah, I really like Ferguson too. I like Trey McBride maybe as a bring back. If you're we're talking about Hollywood Brown, how are the Niners against tight ends?
Very, very good. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw are awesome. I looked at the stats earlier, but they're really good against them. But again, McBride, if they throw the ball 1,000 times, like in the second half, like the Niners are going to be playing. If they're ahead, they're going to be playing pretty soft. They are good against tight ends, but it's a really great game scripting, a lot of targets.
Yeah, and just in general, I don't like playing a guy in a tough matchup that has his highest salary of the season. I'm a big Trey McBride fan. I think he's a really good player, but yeah, maybe this isn't the spot. I'm with you. Ferguson is my favorite as well. We say nobody's going to play Travis Kelce. We sort of always say this. I'm not going to play him. Doesn't seem like he just doesn't hit ceilings as consistently anymore. Could he do it again? Sure. I don't think I'll get there. I kind of like cheap guys.
He sure could throw a backwards lateral well, though.
Yeah, that's too bad that didn't work. We've seen him do that before, right? Was that planned or was that just improvised?
I think it's kind of both. I think it's always kind of an outlet there if they use it, but I don't think I don't think they called that play, but I think it's like, I think they know it's there, but I never talked about the offsides and everything, but like the fact that he like at pretty much at full speed stopped with like two guys on him and threw like a perfect spiral to Tony. Like I think I got lost in the whole thing, how beautiful that play. Like it's really hard to do as a non-quarterback, just to like flip that back and throw a spiral like right at Tony. It was a perfect play.
Yeah,
he short hops that and it's like the biggest disaster play ever, right? Like that's a area of like, oh, it's a great play. It's also a risky play. You're throwing the ball backwards in the middle of the field. He's wide open, but like so many guys would short hop that or airmail someone. Like he just did it perfectly. That part of it was really impressive to me.
You're right. It just, for everything you said, it deserved to work. Just the fact that he tried it, the fact that he threw it perfectly. You're right. I think it's one of those things that's just there. So, he's thinking of that. Yeah, that's really good play. It's too bad.
By the way, Tony was offside.
He was, yeah. Oh man, what a season it's been for Tony. I mean, that
started off in the opening night with that disaster game, and now this. But
oof, yeah.
From talking as we've done this before, I think that we're both kind of on the same page with time. I think we maybe a mid-range guy with Ferguson or McBride, or kind of going down in the low threes, high twos. You've mentioned Chico Conquo a couple times. I like to hear you say that because I actually had him bolded this week. 17 targets last 3 weeks. He's like second in the Will Levis targets to Hopkins. And last 3 games, 445, 3 for 62, 5 for 46. Not huge games for 2,900. That works. And all you need is a touchdown in there, and it really, really works.
Yeah, and they run specific plays for him, and he's a guy that has like some explosiveness to him. He can score a 50-yard touchdown for sure. So definitely like him. We mentioned Kraft, like Tucker Kraft. I think you can play either Kraft or Chig in cash games if you want to. They project as the best value down here, and I think both of them will be relatively popular. The one other guy that I'd have interest in tournaments is if I play Josh Allen, I do think you could take a shot on Dawson Knox. He's only 2,700. He caught 3 for 36 in his return last week, and he could for sure catch a touchdown for 2,700. So I think he's in play for tournaments.
Yeah, I think that's only if you play Allen kind of stacky kind of play. Right. He was down in snaps, but you're right. I mean, and they looked at him in the red zone. He's
touchdown dependent. Yeah.
And they looked to him in the red zone. So I think that works. You mentioned Dalton Schultz is probably going to play, so I've crossed Brevin Jordan off. I mentioned him earlier, but obviously if Schultz plays, no Brevin Jordan interest at all. Defenses. Last week we had some good ones. I think we mentioned, I forget who it was, but I think we mentioned Atlanta and Minnesota. Who do you like at defense this week? It seems like the more appealing plays are definitely priced up this week. The Niners are 4,400. The Dolphins are 4,000 against the Jets in the wind. The Chiefs are 3,900. They're all expensive, but all really, obviously appealing. Who do you like? Are you going expensive, or do you find someone down lower that you like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the first week in a while where there's not going to be a massive chalk defense play, at least as things stand now. I'm seeing maybe the Rams are going to be a little bit popular. A home matchup against Washington. There's been that narrative all season of Howell taking a ton of sacks. I don't know how much it's been recently, but I never really like playing defenses against teams coming off a bye, especially when they're going to be chalk. So, I mean, Rams are a fine option, of course, but I'm not sure I'll go there. I think the Browns are kind of interesting again. They've just been so good, and now they get Fields at home, but it doesn't seem like a must either. Yeah, Dolphins are expensive, you mentioned. Saints expensive, as you mentioned. They're projecting well, but they're up there. I don't think like they stand out a ton. I think I would have a little bit of interest in the Titans if Davis Mills starts, but
Yep.
again, they're expensive. And then
How much issue do you have if Case Keenum starts though? Just making fun of myself.
Yeah, no. And then the cheap one, I don't know. Again, I don't really like them, but I think people will play Buffalo just because they seem like they're one of the only cheap defenses that you can kind of click on. They're averaging almost 9 fantasy points per game, and they're only 2,400. But again, I don't really want to click that either. I don't know, Scott. Help me out. I don't have any strong takes here.
I got 3.
Okay.
One is the Rams. Your point on the bye makes sense, though. That is a good point. But Washington has allowed, I'm doing the math really quick in my head, 17 sacks last. No, a little bit less than that. 11. Yeah, 17 sacks last 5 weeks. 3, 4, 4, 3, and 3. The Rams have multiple sacks at 8 straight. Sam Howell might throw it to the other team. I could see that. A little bit higher than that. I like Atlanta against Carolina this week. They're 3,600. You look at the Panthers' sacks given up, it's 4, 4, 4, 7, 3, 4, 6, and 4 the last 8 weeks. That is an insane. Wow. They haven't given up less than 3 sacks in 8 weeks. Like, that's crazy. I think the Falcons will get after them. Bryce Young is a mess right now. I don't know. If you're Carolina, they got to be regretting that pick at some point here because he doesn't look close to the world CJ Stroud's in, obviously. And then if I'm going, so that's my Rams are kind of my middle one, Falcons above. I'm going super cheap. I'm going the Jets against Miami, 2,500. The Jets have 8 sacks the last 2 weeks. They've allowed under 200 yards total offense in both. If you get some wind, maybe we get a Tua ball that floats in the air. Miami gave 5 sacks last week to Tennessee. I think that if you get Tua off his like drop, throw, timing pattern kind of stuff, so you can really get him to make some mistakes. He'll hold the ball if that first option's not there. If you can get him on a sack, Tua is obviously really good. This offense is great, but I think they showed the good defense kind of can mess them up a little bit. I think they kind of fall out. If Tyreek doesn't play, leaving them more interesting there. I think the Jets at 2,500 are workable. They have a little bit of a floor with the sacks, and then maybe a big play, and you get some weather going. I think that's my favorite play under in the really cheap range.
Yeah, thank you. Those are 2 very good shouts, and I think those are the 2 weather games as well.
Yep.
So just makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes weather could work. You don't want like a team to run the ball 100 times against your defense, but you get a little bit of weather that's kind of slippery ball. I think you want that in between where it's not a monsoon, but wet and slippery and loose balls. You want that with your defense.
Yeah, no, yeah. Sorry, I was just thinking about Bryce Young over Stroud. That's going to end up looking pretty bad. I think
we're not there yet, but like if you're Carolina and you trade it up, you don't have a number 1 pick now. Like. CJ's looked awesome and Bryce has looked anything but. That could change. There's a lot of factors in, first year quarterbacks can look different, but man, do they look like different players.
Yeah, right now. It's got some Greg Oden over Kevin Durant vibes.
Oh man. that's not the best comp if you're a Carolina fan right there. I think Durant worked out a little better there, but yeah. Anyway, I think that's kind of it. We ran for a 10-game slate. I think we covered pretty much everything. That was a fun. It's a fun slate. That was a fun breakdown. Anything else on your mind? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered quite a bit.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening. I know we're in week 15 and we've been in with you for a while, but we appreciate everybody sticking in and listening. Hopefully it's a fun listen, hopefully a valuable listen for you. Also, if you could please rate and review the podcast, that'd be great. You want to follow me on Twitter? I am at Scott Jenstad. I promise as few Draymond Green takes as possible on my Twitter. I'm kind of over talking about that. If you want to follow Ryan, he's at Ryan Belongia, Belongia. Hit us up on there with any questions. As the kind of weather and injuries happen over the weekend, definitely let us know if you have any questions about how that impacts stuff, because that definitely fully does. So hopefully everything that. Hope it was a really good week 15. Hopefully has a good time there. Enjoy the Saturday games. Enjoy the Sunday slate. Hope everybody's a good week and take care.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.